Hey everyone, Shinobi here giving you my first impressions of the Onryō from the Ringu chapter PTB. If you want to watch me playing DVD as well as other games, I stream them at twitch.tv/Shinorbi on Sunday through Tuesday nights and on Friday or Saturday nights as well. With that out of the way, let's get to talking about this new killer. Now, the first thing I want to cover here with the Onryō is the look and feel as well as the sound effects they've put into the game. They've really gone out of their way to try to capture the whole essence of the Ringu story. As you can see here coming out of the well, very creepy movement. You can see the tracking lines as well as if we're watching a videotape. So all this stuff is very reminiscent to the source material that they're trying to capture very well here. So it really gives you a nice sense of fear if you ever watched the original movies back in the day. Some of the stuff you might notice as well is that you have the distortion sounds when she uses her powers, as well as the sense of her crawling out of the TVs on the levels, which we'll cover here in a little bit. It just adds this extra jump scare mechanic that not a lot of killers have nowadays, honestly. And then on top of that, the last thing would be the chase music, where I think it lands in this gray area of not being too annoying or repetitive. So it's something you can actually enjoy as you're being chased by this killer. Moving on, let's take a look at the Onryō themselves. So attribute-wise, this character is classified as being short, which is different from any other killer in the game currently, as no killer has been labeled as short necessarily. The closest we've come to a short killer would be Victor from the twins, or when Blight first came out and was bugged and their point of view was actually lower than they should have been, as they were actually labeled a tall killer. Now, currently looking at that, the PTB, the point of view for the Onryō is actually possibly a little lower than it's supposed to be. So I wouldn't be surprised if the point of view comes up a little bit higher, but nonetheless, she is a short killer. On top of that, she does have a tear radius of 32 meters. So that's very average for any killer. And also a move speed of 4.6 meters per second. Again, very average for any other killer currently out there. Let's move on to her power, which is called the Deluge of Fear, and there's a bunch of different things combined into it, so let's cover them one by one here. First, she has her demanifested state. She starts every match demanifested. While demanifested, she's undetectable and invisible outside of 32 meters, which is her tear radius, and inside that 32 meters, she phases in and out. Roughly, it comes to about 1.5 seconds of being visible and then phasing out for 1 second of being invisible, essentially. During the time that she is demanifested, she has no collisions with survivors. So that means no body blocking survivors out from windows or blocking them into corners, but it also means survivors cannot try to body block you from trying to get to their teammate who's injured or is possibly on death hook. So some ways you can use this is very interesting is she kind of plays as a stealth killer, so it's a great way to catch survivors by surprise. It can also be used in combination with her short height to mind game loops, as she doesn't really have any other mechanics to help her in the loop game. So she really relies on mind games. So this demanifested state helps with that phasing in and out. A big thing that we'll come to is timing your manifestation phase, which is what we're going to talk to now, because that transition between demanifestation to manifestation is a huge part of her being able to hit survivors. Now, when it comes to manifesting, it takes about 2.5 seconds to channel it and become manifested. The plus side, there's no slowdown while you're channeling it. So as you're chasing a survivor, you can manifest yourself and not get slowed down while doing it. But one thing to remember, unlike, say, for example, Wraith, when they come out of their stealth, they have a speed boost. She gets no speed boost when manifesting. After you've manifested, you have about 1 second of where you're still kind of phasing in and out, and you still have this undetectable status effect on you. So you can try to use that to your advantage. But a big thing is you have to be manifested to hit survivors as well as block them. If you're trying to block a window or block them, again, like by a gen or something like that. But you do not need to be manifested to interact with objects such as gens, pallets, lockers, and stuff like that. Now, another part of her power is projection. While you are demanifested, you can teleport to one of the TVs that are on the map now as you're playing Onryo. Stuff to note about the TVs is all the TVs start off at the beginning of the match, and there's a short time period. I believe it's about 30 seconds, give or take. I can't give you the exact number, before they're all turned on. There can always be up to 5 TVs on a map, and there's more than 5 TVs on the level itself, so you don't have to worry about the same 5 TVs always being on, and generally the TVs will be no less than 16 meters from each other. Once you've projected yourself to one of these TVs after being in a demanifested form, you will come out manifested and the TV will be powered off, but another TV will generally turn on after a short time. When you come out of the TV from your projection, you do come out with a speed boost, so you can use that to your advantage if there's a survivor nearby to try to catch them by surprise. Some stuff to consider though is that survivors can take the tapes from any TVs that are currently on the map that are currently turned on, and those TVs will stay off for 60 seconds before they will turn back on at any given time. So now, speaking about the survivors taking tapes from TVs, this goes into kind of the last part of her power, which is the condemned meter. Generally, a survivor will gain a stack of condemn if the Onryō projects to a TV within 60 meters of that survivor. Also, when the survivor takes a tape from a TV, they gain 1 stack of condemned as well. Now, while the survivor has the tape in their hand, they will gain a stack of condemned about every 60 seconds while holding that TV. And again, while they're holding that tape, if they come across another TV, they can interact with it to turn it off. There will be 1 TV on the level indicated to the survivor where they can return that tape. If they return that tape to that indicated TV, they will lose about 4 to 5 stacks of condemned, which is pretty considerable. So they can actually use that mechanic to limit the Onryō's ability to teleport around, take on some condemned, taking out a few more TVs along the way, returning the tape to the indicated TV, and that will help juggle that condemned status effect. Also, one thing to consider is the passive condemned progress is paused when the Onryō is in chase with the survivor holding a tape, so they will not gain that passive condemned status effect every 30 seconds. Another thing to consider is a survivor has to pay attention to their condemned meter, because if it ever reaches full, which is 7, to go along with the whole Onryō Ringu chapter feel, 7 days, 7 markers. Once those markers are all filled, the killer is indicated with a killer instinct around that survivor, and if the killer is able to down that survivor while they're condemned, they will be able to perform a mini Mori, kind of like Pyramid Head, against that survivor and take them instantly out of the game. Continuing on from her power, let's take a look at her perks here, starting with Scourge Hook, Floods of Rage. This kind of works like a reverse barbecue, where it reveals survivors when a survivor is unhooked from one of these scourged hooks. It can still be countered with lockers, just like barbecue, but it does reveal all the survivors, which is a nice effect to have on there. So in those cases where someone might be getting a survivor off hook, but then refuses to take the hit for that survivor they just saved, you do know where that other survivor ran off to or might be hiding nearby. But a big drawback of it is it does rely on those scourge hooks, so you do need to get them on one of those indicated scourge hooks for this perk to take any effect. Next, for her perks, we'll take a look at Call of Brine. Here we have a kind of localized ruin where we don't have it affecting every gen on the map. It's affecting only a gen that you have kicked. The benefits of this is that it can interact with other gen kick perks such as Oppression, Pop Goes the Weasel, and Overcharge to give you extra effects to add with it. One drawback you have to remember is that it only lasts for 60 seconds, so it might not fully regress a full gen, but it can come pretty damn near it. So if you also throw on there, say for example, Pop Goes the Weasel, you can actually regress a gen fully using this if you're able to get those full 60 seconds. And the last of her perks is called Merciless Storm. This one can kind of play as an interesting surprise to people that might not be expecting it, but I do feel like it'll probably lose its value over time as people kind of become more used to it, kind of like Overcharge. Maybe it'll catch someone by surprise the first time, but later through the match it might not have as much effect, or if people are more wary and know that this might be coming with this killer, they might be expecting it more at that point. So eventually I think this is going to kind of fall into one of those more niche perks, it falls into maybe a meme build or very specific builds around the gen reaching that last part of checks. Let's wrap this up with my thoughts of the balance of the killer as well as any final thoughts I might have on her. Looking at what I've come across currently in PTB, she doesn't seem very overpowered, but also she doesn't seem on the weak side of killers. Her perks and power feel pretty good. They could use some tweaks, maybe along the lines of the condemned mechanic being a little bit more threatening. Some of the thoughts I've had with it is maybe the survivor, once reaching full condemned, becomes exposed, so they have that little bit more of a threat of being downed and killed more readily. And then something else would maybe be having that killer instinct trigger every time that survivor passes a TV that is on, say, about 16 meters within that TV. Again, kind of playing into that whole Ringu feel of TV comes on, survivor sees it, they freak out because they're so close to it because they know that killer might be coming through it at any point in time. My thoughts on her play style is she'll probably come down more like a hit and run type of stealth killer, utilizing the projections to cover a lot of the map effectively and giving that pressure in that kind of sense, and also using the demanifest and manifest to get close and surprise survivors, as it can also kind of help in loops, and it's really the only thing she has to use at loops against survivors. With that in mind though, you don't really want to overcommit to chases with survivors because, again, she has something to help her in loops, but she's not really an anti-loop killer as we've seen with other recent killers. So you probably don't want to overcommit to chases, know when to break off, and just go apply pressure to another survivor. Try to keep them busy off of gens, and if possible, keep them healing as much as you can. As for her ranking, I think that she kind of falls in this mid-tier kind of feel. So I would put her maybe like at a low B, maybe a high C rank. And we're talking about this, S through D rank system that we've seen quite often. And the reason for that is that she's most likely going to suffer against coordinated teams, as they can really effectively manage the condemned status on them, as well as keeping those TVs turned off, hindering her ability to teleport around. On top of that, she is kind of a weak chase killer if someone wanted to use her in that way, because you can maybe try to chase using projections, cutting people off as if you can see a TV up ahead, but since those TVs can be kind of RNG, you can't always count on them being exactly where you need them. You'll kind of have to guide them where you want to go. It's almost like a trapper that didn't get to choose where their traps were. So those are my thoughts for the Onryō and the Ringu PTB after playing it for several hours. I hope to see some minor tweaks to the character, in particular around her condemned mechanic. But even if she doesn't receive any changes, I think that this killer is going to end up being a very fun one to play and play against, honestly. Just from seeing everything in the PTB so far with the feel of it, they've really done a great job of giving us the Ringu feel. So with that, if you've liked and enjoyed what I'd had to say, make sure you hit that like button down below. My next DVD video will most likely be covering the issue of burnout and what to do about it. If you want to see that when it comes out, as well as any other videos I put out, make sure to subscribe to my channel. That's it for me. Thank you for coming to my channel and take care of yourselves.